Welcome to Super Aging Podcast. This podcast strives to promote healthy aging and amplify caregiver voices while raising awareness about dementia. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Fatou Ceesay. As you may be aware, June is Alzheimer's and Brain Health Awareness Month. So today we're speaking all things brain health and dementia. Today I am speaking with Dr. Ozioma Okonkwo. Dr. Okonkwo is a faculty member in the Division of Geriatrics and Gerontology within the Department of Medicine at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. He is dedicated to the scientific study of promising approaches to prevent the onset of Alzheimer's disease or slowing its progression after the disease onset. On a more personal note, Ozioma is also my dear brother. So I'm delighted to have him on today. Welcome to Super Agent Ozioma.
Thank you, Fatou. It's my pleasure to be here, and I cannot get this grin off my face.
All right, let's get serious. All right.
Yes, we shall. We shall try. It's a
Okay,
pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
you're very welcome. So, as you know, brain health, June is Brain Health Awareness Month. Can you tell me what the significance of this? What is the significance for this to you?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you brought that up right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
June indeed is a month dedicated to brain health, and the Alzheimer's Association obviously invests a lot of time and effort into promoting this month and activities. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really a time for us to be a little bit more intentional about the activities and our attitude in general towards taking care of our brains, because
Mm-hmm.
really our brains are our most precious assets. Our brains allows us to do everything else that we do in life, including hosting a podcast. Yes, it does. So it's wonderful to have a month where we can be a little bit more intentional
Mm-hmm.
about all of the things that we can do or we should be doing to really preserve these precious assets that we have.
Thank you. That is very well said. And yes, including hosting a podcast. So, your research interest includes how and why certain individuals will develop Alzheimer's and why some people may be at risk even when they are not showing symptoms. So, my question to you is what inspired you to pursue this research in Alzheimer's?
Thank you. You know, just growing up, as you know, we were always surrounded by our elders,
Mm-hmm.
and we had elders who lived, well into their hundreds of years,
Mm-hmm.
100 and beyond, and they still looked sharp and spry and danced, and did everything that most young people would do. And we also had some elders who sadly did not have the same outcome, even when they were in their 60s or 70s. They looked like they were they were almost at the end of their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
clearly back then we did not know what Alzheimer's was or dementia. We just thought it was all getting old. But seeing that disparity really inspired me to begin to think about how do people age, how and why do people age so differently? And sometimes it's even in the same family, siblings, as
Mm-hmm.
age so differently. And so when I got into the field of Alzheimer's and began to understand some of the brain changes that occur in Alzheimer's, I remembered all of these experiences growing up. And so I brought that lens of seeing a disparity in the process into this field of Alzheimer's dementia.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Um, so you can you share especially what kind of research you focused on?
Yes, yes. So as you mentioned, my research is focused on this notion of resilience to Alzheimer's or cognitive reserve to Alzheimer's. And essentially, it tries to understand why is it that individuals whom given either their risk factors, so let's say they carry a copy or two copies of the ApoE4 allele. So the ApoE4 is the gene that puts individuals at risk for late onset Alzheimer's.
Okay.
So there are individuals that you might see and they have all of these risk factors, or even you put them through a brain scan and you see that their brain already are starting to show some of the diseases that we think of as Alzheimer's.
Okay.
But then they do not go on to show any signs of dementia, even when you follow them into late life. So that really is what my lab is focused on, is this broad theme of resilience or reserve or resistance. There are many words that can be used to describe that phenomenon. And so in trying to study that, we focus on modifiable, that is lifestyle, as well as non-modifiable, for example, genetics, factors that confer resilience to Alzheimer's. And yes, that is kind of what my lab is focused on.
Okay, so the focus there is resilience. Great. So what's your motivation to choose the exercise on delaying the onset of the progression?
Right, great question. So as I mentioned, my lab studies a host of modifiable factors that might confer resilience. But increasingly, most of our studies in this area look at physical activity and exercise for a number of reasons. One is that it is a modifiable factor that most people can easily relate to, you know. But secondly, and probably even more important, is the fact that of the different modifiable factors that we might study, exercise is the one that is most amenable to experimental manipulation. So, for example, even though we know that education, is also a factor that confers resilience to Alzheimer's, you really cannot do a study where you randomize individuals to get more or less education. That doesn't happen. Now there are some real world and naturally occurring experiments, not because that is how anyone designed them, but that is how society evolved, where you can then begin to look at what are the benefits and risks of having more or less education. But you probably cannot write a grant to the NIH and say, I'm going to randomize some kids to not get any education, right? That wouldn't work. So that is how exercise and physical activity came to be one of the key lens through which we study resilience or reserve. But pretty much we look at a host of factors, some modifiable, some not modifiable, that we believe can and do confer protection against the onset or the progression of Alzheimer's.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. So what kind of exercise would you say are more beneficial to brain health?
This is a question we get often, and there are a couple of ways I can answer it. I would say, first of all exercise is good for your brain.
Okay.
There is no exercise, as long as it is done safely and under direction and care of your physician. All exercise are beneficial for brain health. Now, having said that, the research and the evidence seems to favor what is called aerobic exercise. Okay. And that is the kind of exercise that kind of raises your heart rate. Okay. And there are all kinds of them, included, the most common one being running, swimming. So pretty much any exercise that kind of elevates your cardiac response is one that actually has been shown to have the greatest potential for being beneficial for brain health.
Thank you. So is there an ideal age to start exercise?
Indeed, yes. And I would say in the womb, when you are still being carried in the mother's womb, and And it's true. It's true. Actually,
Oh
there's been
my.
some studies, done, to look at moms who stayed physically active when they were pregnant and those who didn't. Not only is there a differential in the labor process for these two different sets of women, but when those kids whose moms exercised and those whose mom didn't are followed over time, some studies have shown that there actually is a difference in the outcome in these kids. So even the exercise that you get through your mother seems to have some potential to benefit
Oh
you.
my goodness.
Yes, yes, but really, that there is no it's never too early, nor is it too late to begin to exercise. And the thing, with exercise, as a lifestyle habit,
Mhm.
and that is how we want to think about it, is that when you begin to take care of yourself in that particular way,
Mhm.
most often that also triggers a lifestyle change in other areas of your life, because you begin to see how everything all fits together. So you
Mm.
begin to take more care of your sleep, your diet, and so forth.
So it's a holistic approach to
Correct,
well-being.
correct, correct.
Interesting. I've never had anybody explain it in this way, that you should start when you're in your mom's womb.
That's correct.
Oh, well, thank you. So, as we get older, muscle strength is important. For those who are listening and perhaps don't exercise, um, is there a cutoff time to start exercising? I know you just mentioned that it's never too late, but
Correct. Yes, yes, it's never too late. In fact, some of the studies that we do, we specifically enroll individuals who are in their 60s or 70s, but who have never really been physically active their entire life. And then
mm,
we put them through a period of a physical exercise regimen, and we see if there is any differences between them and other people who also have not been physically active, but who we did not put in that same regimen. And we see that even when someone is in the 60s and beyond,
mm-hmm,
and they are led through a structured regimen of
mm-hmm,
exercise, that within a few short weeks, you begin to see differences in their brain and cognitive function, and even in their mood, compared to other individuals who did not get put in similar programs. So really, it's never too late to
okay.
begin this very healthy habit of physical activity.
Well, wonderful. So that gives me hope, and I'm sure it gives some other people hope too, who are not as active. And by the way, I'm active, but it's still, I would say, it gives anybody hope who's out there who haven't started yet. So I would say jump in and get started for
That's right.
this
That's
healthy
right.
habit. So we hear the term neuroplasticity. I tend to hear it often within my circle. So I wanted to ask, what does this term mean, and what activities can we engage in to increase or regrow our brain cells?
Great question. So you're right that it is a word that is being heard more commonly these days.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, for a long time, the field of neuroscience kind of held this belief that pretty much when a child is born and they keep growing, that's around your mid to late teens, that pretty much you have evolved and developed all of the brain cells that you would use for the rest of your life. So the brain is
Mm-hmm.
pretty much set at that point and does not undergo any more plastic changes as a result of experience or genetics or anything else. But over time, from a series of very intriguing experiments, um, studies began to kind of punch holes in this dogma And currently, we know that indeed the brain continues to change even into late adulthood. As I mentioned just previously, when we enroll individuals who have not really had any amount of physical activity and they are in their 60s, and we put them just through a few weeks of structured aerobic exercise, we are able to detect changes in their brain and cognitive function after just a few short weeks when they're already in the sixth or seventh decades of life.
Wow.
So yes, the brain does continue to change and evolve and grow new cells, as a result of experience. And experience here includes, things like physical activity, but also, activities that engage the mind. This include, reading, volunteering, socializing, playing games, video games, board games, chess, cards, anything that actually engages the mind and the brain has the potential to reshape and rewire the brain cells. We like to say that the brain is like a muscle. The more it is used, the stronger it becomes.
That's wonderful. That's really good. So we should always engage in brain stimulating activities to enhance our brain functioning.
Correct.
Great. So part of your study includes sleep. Can you tell us the relationship between sleep and brain health and dementia?
Yes, fantastic question. Now, the studies that we do in the areas of sleep are mostly done with collaborators who are the experts in this domain. Okay. But because, again, my lab is a multi-domain lab, we really look at a host of factors. In this case, sleep is one of those modifiable factors we have studied in collaboration with colleagues who are the content experts in this area. So a number of studies that began actually with studies in mice, showed that when a mouse is deprived of sleep overnight and many days in a row, that they begin to build up at a faster rate the type of abnormal proteins that then go on to cause Alzheimer's and other types of dementias. The most common one being amyloid plaques.
Okay.
And then that also slowly then other studies in humans began to show the same things, that when humans are deprived of sleep, or even have a reduced number of hours of sleeping than they would typically get, that the rate of clearance of amyloid is slower in all of those individuals. So currently, the way we've begun to understand it is that sleep is like this opportunity for not just our bodies to rest and refresh, but for our brains too, our central nervous system to actually rest and almost get flushed out to begin all over again. It's almost like a chance to hit reset, not only for our bodies, but for our brains. And so it is very important that individuals understand this, because a lot of times when, and I'm the first, culprit of this, when I have too much to do and too little time, I begin to look for areas to cut off time from. And one of the first areas I go to is my sleep, Okay, I will sleep for 1 hour less,
Yeah.
But in the long term, really, you may have saved that hour and done and met that deadline. But if you keep up this in the long term, it actually, the science seems to indicate that it might have negative long-term consequences for your brain.
Wow. And that happens so frequently. As you know, it's like,
yes,
get stuff done. Everybody's on a deadline, trying to get stuff done, and sleep is something we should not compromise on. And it is the one thing also that seemed to be a point of compromise for people to go to. But yeah, so thank you for that information.
Yes, yes.
So I will go back to what you were mentioning. It almost seemed like when you explain this, how sleep impacts our brain, it's almost like getting our brains cleaned out or washed, to
Much.
refresh it after, like, that's what sleep is to our brain, right?
Yes,
That's amazing.
it
Well,
is. It is.
yeah, that's really, really amazing. So now, growing up, I know, and up to this late, we tend to say, oh, I lost sleep for a while, and I'm getting some of my sleep back. So when you try to like regain your sleep, you take a nap, or you didn't have good sleep last night and you take a nap in the day. Is there really, do we have the ability to regain lost sleep, or is this a false phenomena? Is it a myth to regain sleep, or is it not? I guess that's what I'm getting at, because that's something that I tend to think, and I've heard that a lot, and I know that people tend to think that, but is that factual scientifically?
Right. So again, the studies that have been done in this area indicate that the answer is both a yes and a no. And pretty much
Okay.
it boils down to how long of a period has the individual been deprived of sleep.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's even go away from sleep and think about food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about the individual whom for whatever reason, let's say that sadly they were captured as a prisoner of war and they were starved, right? And they were starved for, like, let's say 2 months, right?
Okay.
And then they were rescued, right? And it will be inconceivable that anyone would think that, okay, no, we've rescued them, let's set this table piled with food, and give them all this food now, and that will somehow fix the fact that they have been starved, right, for 2 months. Like, no one would think that, right? Because
Yeah,
you
that's a
cannot
great
fix
analogy.
2 months of starvation with a bountiful table piled high with food,
Huh.
right? um but if someone skipped breakfast, and they found that they were a bit more hungry at lunch and they ate a bit more, that kind of tends to even out the fact that breakfast was skipped. Not that we should skip breakfast, but just as an example. So it's a yes and a no, and it boils down to the duration and intensity of the sleep deprivation. That is what we may or may not be able to make up.
Huh.
But I want to emphasize that, just as we said with exercise, how it's never too late to begin, also with sleep, and pretty much with any healthy habit, you know, it's never too late to realize that, oh, I can choose differently. I can do differently, and to begin at that point to reset the clock to adopt a healthier lifestyle. The same applies for sleep too.
Wonderful. I really love your sleep analogy. I guess with food and starvation, and I've never think about it that way. I've never heard somebody explain it that way. So it just makes so much sense. Yeah.
Yes, you're welcome. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as growing up, our elders told lots of stories, and those stories may not always be true, but they always taught a lesson that really cannot be taught better with just using words,
True.
And we all learned growing up and to kind of adopt that same attitude, that sometimes an analogy, makes the point stronger than
Right.
an abstract sentence would do.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely. Yes.
yes.
So your research assess brain health using many different markers. Can you tell us a little bit about how your research assess brain health?
Yes, so as you know, I am part of the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. And so being fortunate enough to be at such a world-class institution as the University of Wisconsin, it makes available to me and pretty much to all of my colleagues really top of the line scientific equipment and procedures that allows us to study the human brain in ways that not every other scientist might have access to. So in studying the brain and the central nervous system, we do a series of brain imaging, different types. When people hear MRI, they tend to just think that there is one thing called MRI, but there actually are many different types of brain sequences that can be done under the umbrella term MRI.
Okay.
Some of them are looking at the structure of the brain.
Okay.
Some are looking at how the brain cells are connected, kind of how the white matter tracts are connected. Some of them are looking at how blood is flowing in the brain. And some of them are looking at how does the brain respond acutely to experience. So, and all of this fall under the term MRI.
Okay.
So outside of MRI, we also do what is called PET scans. And PET scans are different from MRIs.
Okay.
PET scans allows us to understand the how certain types of dynamic changes are occurring in the brain.
Okay.
And so, for instance, PET scans are what allows us to investigate whether somebody has amyloid in their brain. And as we know, amyloid is the protein that is most responsible for Alzheimer's.
Right.
And so we kind of inject the individual with a little dye, and then that dye is taken up in the brain, and then we're able to take a picture in real time of the brain and see where that dye is lighting up.
Okay.
That helps us understand, if this individual has amyloid, and if so, where in the brain they do. In addition to brain scans, we also collect cerebrospinal fluid.
Okay.
So our brains that sit in our skulls, our brains actually are sitting in this like little bath water, like our skull, our skulls are like this little bathtub, that our brains are sitting in. And cerebrospinal fluid is like the bath water that our brains are sitting in.
Okay.
And so we are able to take a very small quantities from the lower back, from the lower back.
Okay.
And then we test those samples for the presence of some of these proteins that we know are indicative of Alzheimer's and other types of dementias. So these are some of the ways that we are able to study the brain. And currently, more recently, we've also found ways to use blood samples to test for those same proteins that we previously could only test through cerebrospinal fluid. So advances continue to be made that allows us to have a more in-depth look at the brain's health and sadly at the brain state of disease too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that advances continue to happen so that more tools and more ways of investigation is happening to identify this disease and to tackle it where it can be.
Yes.
So that is very much needed, and I do appreciate all the work you and your colleagues are doing in that front.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. It honestly takes a village, everyone doing their part to make something like this happen, because to really do good science, gone are the days when that can just be done by a single principal investigator in the lab with 2 or 3 students. Science these days is so complex that to answer the big questions, it really takes a team, and that is where the concept of team science comes from. It
Right.
takes a big village, yes, to make all of this happen. And I'm so grateful for the wonderful colleagues and students that I have who do all of this wonderful work with me.
Thank you. So are there a certain marker in the brain of the brain health that begins to change without being aware, without people being aware, or without us being aware of it?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, with the use with the advantage of having access to top of the line brain scans, we are actually able to actually have a window into the brain to understand some of the very earliest changes that happen when individuals are starting to go down this unfortunate path towards having Alzheimer's. So we're able to use both PET scans and MRI scans, and even some advanced cognitive tests to really study how the brain is doing. So with the combination of these different tools and approaches, we are able to get a sense at some of those very earliest changes that might be happening when the individual is still in their 40s or 50s, and for all intents and purposes are doing well. But sadly, they already are at that point on this path that might in the future lead to dementia.
So tell me, what is the significance of early detection, and how does that help the individual as they walk this journey?
Right, and that is a wonderful question, and we get that all the time, but particularly in the era before now, or before just this week, when there really was not really a cure, and there still isn't a cure. And by the way, but before this time, we got that question a lot, like, what does it matter? And we like to say that again, it varies from individuals to individuals. There are individuals who do not want to know; they simply want to enjoy every day and fully, and not be, burdened by a thought that they might be on the path to a disease that is terminal. And but for those other individuals who kind of have a thing where they like to have knowledge and information, being able to identify that something is starting to happen in your brain that might put you at risk for dementia or Alzheimer's and down the road. Some individuals use that opportunity almost as a wake-up call. Okay, now I only have maybe say 10 years. I know I want to be extremely intentional in how I spend those 10 years. I want to rearrange my life so that my kids don't have to worry about X or Y or Z. I want to travel more, but even if we circle back to where this podcast started, about the focus of my research, right?
Yes.
It's cognitive reserve and resilience. We have shown that not everybody who has this early warning signs of brain changes go on to develop dementia.
Right.
And so for some individuals, this wake-up call might also be an opportunity for them to begin today, if they've not been doing it, to begin to adopt some of these healthy lifestyles that we have shown has the potential to delay the progression of the disease. So these are a number of the reasons why early detection might be helpful. But again, there are individuals for whom maybe it just creates more worry than anything else, and we we also acknowledge that too.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you. I mean, all of those reasons are wonderful, but to think that early detection and taking charge of your life, making some changes to a better, healthier lifestyle can delay that onset, and perhaps you don't even show symptoms at all. It's remarkable. I think even that in itself, it's a big reason for anybody to want to know. But you're right, for those who don't want to worry as well, that is what it is too, can be acknowledged.
Yes, correct,
Yeah.
correct. I want to say, that um on unnecessary and worry, or sorry, excessive worry, is something that some groups have also been shown to put individuals at risk for different types of cognitive impairments and
Okay.
dementias. So if somebody really knows themselves and knows that they are prone to that, then we respect and we honor where they are coming from and the truth about themselves. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. So are you recruiting now?
Currently, yes, we are recruiting. However, for the studies that we have going on, all of our participants come to us because they already are enrolled in one of two large studies at our center. So they either are already in the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center clinical core, or they are in this other study called the Wisconsin Registry for Alzheimer's Prevention. So they already are enrolled in these two very large studies, and then they come into our studies from either of those two pipelines. So currently, we do not have any studies that are enrolling from the community, but that will be something I'll be happy to share with your audience when the studies come along.
Okay, that will be great, so that they
Yes.
can understand what the process is to enroll in those programs or the study. So we know that old age comes with many challenges, both in terms of physical health, mental health, and well-being. So from your point of view as a researcher of the brain and a neural system, what is the difference between healthy aging and super aging?
That is a wonderful, wonderful question. So maybe it might be easier to start with talking about what super aging is, and then to dial it down from there.
Yes.
And as with science, as with all other areas of science, if you ask 10 scientists, a question, you probably will get 10 different answers. So the term super aging also tends to be used in different ways by different individuals. However, the conventional understanding of super aging is this phenomenon where some individuals, when you look at them in their 70s, not only are they sharp, good, in great health, everything for being 70, they actually are in better health, mental, physical, and otherwise, than someone who is decades younger. So in terms of their health and their well-being, both mentally and physically and otherwise, they are performing as well as someone who is 50. That is super aging.
That is super aging.
Correct. Now,
that is super aging, this podcast right here.
That's right. That's right. That's right. This podcast here is super aging. That's right. It is way out of this world. It is like way all the way there. That's right.
Yep. We strive for the best.
That's right. It's just crushing it. It's killing it.
There you go.
Yes. Now, for the rest of us mere, models, who are not, super aging, like you and your podcast, healthy aging, just means that for whatever stage of life you are at, you are doing well for that state of life. So
Okay.
if you are 70, you are in the state of health that would be expected of the average 70-year-old. If you are 80, you are in the state of health that is typical of an 80-year-old. And I think that is what most people aspire to. And honestly, that is what the majority of people are only going to be capable of. Super aging is a rare phenomenon, and I have a very good friend and colleague who is studying them in Chicago, and we might have a joint study starting up here in Wisconsin soon. But it's extremely hard to find these individuals. You have to screen thousands and thousands of people to find them, because it is not the natural order of things, and hence it is called super aging. That's right.
Nice. So is your colleague in Northwestern?
Correct. So she is Dr. Emily Rogalski at North and Western, and she has been following this cohort of super agers. And we just last year we submitted a big grant to the NIH to expand her study to multiple sites, and Wisconsin is going to be one of those sites if the grant gets funded. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Fingers crossed.
Well, fingers crossed. That's going to happen. That's wonderful. And what is her name again?
I'm Dr. Emily Rogalski. She is at Northwestern in Chicago.
Okay. Yep. I saw her work online. So great.
Yes.
Great. So what type of changes in mood, behavior, or thinking ability comes with age that are cause for concerns, and and those that are not a cause for concern? What kind of changes would you see that would be like normal, and what is not normal?
Yes, and that also is a very common question that we get, particularly when I still saw patients in the clinic. We got those questions all the time, not just from the patients who came in the clinic, but from their son or their daughter who accompanied them. One of the changes that happen very early as people age is change in language, particularly change in remembrance of names.
Okay.
You meet that person at a party and you're like, I know him. I know where I know him from, but is it James or Jennifer or Halil or no, like the search for the challenge with remembering names is one of the most early and I would say naturally occurring changes that happen with age. And sometimes people begin to get worried that might be indicative of something else. Sometimes it is, but in the majority of cases, it is just the natural sequence of aging. The other thing that happens very commonly with aging is so it is not only that our bodies get slower, like, perhaps, when you were in your 20s, you could run, a mile in eight minutes, right? But now you're in your 70s. It would be ridiculous to think that, you will also run, the same mile in 8 minutes, right? Now, some people can, and those are the super agers, right? But for most everybody, that's right, that's right. But for most everybody else, there is a slowing down of the body that we cannot walk as hard or as fast as we used to. The same thing too happens with our brains. The information is still there, but the speed with which we can access it is much slower. So a slower speed of processing, as it is called, speed of processing, gets slower with aging, and that is very normal. some amount of a change in memory is normal also with aging. And even now, and I don't think I'm an old man quite yet, I walk into a room to do something, and I get there and I'm like, wait, why did I come into this room again? I forget, right?
No, seriously,
So,
that's my life too.
there you go, right, but when some people are in their 70s or 80s, and when they have such incidents, they begin to worry that it's a sign of something else. That happens to people who are also young. Or you park your car and you go into a store and you come out and you can't remember if you parked further down, this way, left, right. Like it's like a big blur.
Right.
So these are some of those things that are just part of the natural process of aging. When it begins to be a little bit more consistent is A, when it becomes more frequent, and B, more severe. Like for instance, just to give an extreme example, when people begin to have the more moderate forms of Alzheimer's or other types of dementia, they couldn't even remember what you just told them right now in this space, or they've just had breakfast, and you ask them a half hour later, what they had for breakfast, and they could not tell you.
Right.
Now, those are, I kind of use that extreme example to kind of make clear the types of changes that for sure are not part of the normal aging process.
Okay. Yeah.
So some change, to summarize, some change in cognition is to be expected with aging. And some of the most common ones, is a slower speed of processing, trouble with remembering names, and some change in memory.
Right, right. I like how you use analogies to explain these things. It clicks much more clearer. I know when you said processing speed, I'm thinking about computer, and as they get old, obviously they perform slower. So
there you go.
Same for our brains. So I like
there you go. There you go. Precisely. Yes. Great analogy there. Precisely that. Fantastic.
Thank you. Well, so to help our listeners who may not be familiar with Alzheimer's or dementia, can you give us a basic overview of what is happening in the brain when someone develops Alzheimer's?
Right, and thank you for asking that question. And so, as I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, there are certain protein abnormalities that occur in the brain that when we see it, we say that this individual, is on the pathway to Alzheimer's. One of those changes is the build-up of a protein called amyloid. And that build-up then clumps together and forms plaques.
Okay.
So when we begin to see these amyloid plaques in the brains, we begin to have worry that this individual might be on the pathway to having Alzheimer's as a clinical syndrome. And actually, I want to take this chance to kind of make a distinction that has become very better understood now in the scientific world. Previously, when someone used the word Alzheimer's, we think like what we mean by that is dementia of the Alzheimer's type.
Okay.
So Alzheimer's equals dementia. But over time, particularly with the types of studies I described, when we see that not everybody who has this protein buildups go on to develop cognitive symptoms, there's become a more nuanced way of talking about this phenomenon. So there is Alzheimer's pathology, that is Alzheimer's as a brain disease, and then there is Alzheimer's clinical syndrome, and that is what dementia is.
Okay.
So going back to this, describing the protein build up in the brain, when the individual has this abnormal clumps of plaques in their brain, at that point, they actually have Alzheimer's as a brain disease.
Okay.
So in addition to plaques, the other very essential feature of Alzheimer's as a brain disease is something called tangles. Tangles form inside the neurons of the brain. And pretty much, it looks just as it sounds, the strings inside the neuron becomes tangled up. And that is what it is called, tangles.
Tangled, okay.
So amyloid plaques and tau tangles are the two main features of Alzheimer's as a brain disease. Now, as the disease begins to advance a little bit more, other things begin to also happen in the brain structure itself. There is a loss of actual brain cells, so a loss of neurons, a loss of synapses in specific areas of the brain. One of them is an area called the hippocampus.
Okay.
And that is the area of the brain that allows us to learn and remember. And it is this loss of neurons and synapses in the hippocampus that underlies the profound memory deficits that we see in people with Alzheimer's dementia. So these are the three, typical changes that occur in the brain of someone who sadly is on the path to developing Alzheimer's. There's the plaques, there's the tangles, and then there's the brain tissue loss. What's called brain atrophy.
I see. Great explanation. Thank you, Dr. Okonkwo. While we can't see what's going on in the brain, what type of changes in behavior will we see in specifically people who have Alzheimer's?
Yes, great question. And the way I think of behavior, I think of it as a more encompassing term that includes cognition. In fact, cognition is the most prominent behavior that each of us exhibits every day. Because even when we are sitting, in an empty room, our brains are working, and that is behavior too. Right. And so the most typical behavior that is found in someone who is on the path to having Alzheimer's type of dementia is a change in memory.
Okay.
And it's a change in a particular type of memory called episodic memory. So memory for episodes.
Okay.
And that is why, as I'm sure you have experienced too in your work in the caregiver business, that even individuals who are in the most profound stages of Alzheimer's, they oftentimes can tell you the exact color of the tie they wore to senior prom. They can tell you the exact place they proposed to their spouse. Right. They can tell you some of these very things from like way back ago. Yes. They remember all of this. But as they are telling you that, if you kind of interrupt them and ask them a question, they're like, what did you ask? Like they are not even able to track the question you asked them in that instance.
Yes.
But they are able to remember things from way back ago.
Absolutely.
So there are different types of memories, and the memories that seem to be mostly affected by Alzheimer's are memory for episodes. Okay. Like, who won the Super Bowl last year? What did you have for breakfast?
Okay.
What time did your cousin or aunt come to drop off the checks to sign? All of those, so those are all episodes, and those are the types of things that individuals with Alzheimer's have the most struggle with. Now, thinking about other types of behavior, and in the classic sense that we use behavior,
right.
behavioral changes in Alzheimer's, and you know this very well, they
Mhm.
are not that common in the earlier stages or in the milder stages of Alzheimer's. They
Right.
become more prominent towards the middle and later stages of Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
And actually, again, this is clearly a space you occupy. In many cases,
Mhm.
it is not the cognitive changes of Alzheimer's that lead families to place a loved one in a facility. It's
Right.
actually the behavioral changes. That
Mhm.
is what families are the least equipped to deal with.
Right.
And when they no longer know how to manage those behaviors, they
Mhm.
end up having to have the
Take them
person
out.
placed in a
Right.
home. And so, but interestingly, though, in the moderate to severe stages of dementia, yes, most people tend to become more aggressive or combative,
Mhm.
or just being non-cooperative. But
Mhm.
that is not the only way behaviors can change as Alzheimer progresses. It can also go the other way,
Mhm.
that someone, in fact, this is some of what this happens more in the earlier stages, that
Mhm.
somebody whose home has always been extremely clean,
Mhm.
extremely neat and tidy, everything goes where it belongs. And
Mhm.
suddenly you come in their house, and it's clear that they have not, swept the house
Yeah.
forever, or
Right.
or
Right.
dusted or
Mhm.
done laundry, you
Mhm.
know. So those are some of those things that could also, happen, that people go from being very meticulous,
Mhm.
to being almost like carefree.
Right.
So these are some of the range of behaviors that can happen when someone is on the path to Alzheimer's.
Mm.
It is important, though, and this is why having access to a great clinician and hospital system is wonderful. That
Mhm.
some of these types of changes may not be due to dementia or due to Alzheimer's.
Okay.
They could be due to a psychiatric syndrome that is occurring in late life.
Okay.
And it would take, a well-trained and physician or clinician to really understand that and tease it apart.
Mm.
It could also occur in the context of even something as innocuous as an infection, a UTI.
Yes.
When an older
It's very
adult has an
common with our
infection, it could
elderly.
affect how they actually think and process and see the world. you
Mhm.
know and so when that is not properly diagnosed and treated, that
Mhm.
person may be misclassified as beginning to have a dementia, when it was just
Yeah.
something that can be resolved and bring them back to baseline.
That is true. And UTIs tend to be something very common in the elderly that they
Exactly,
experience. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So experts such as yourself have identified that the disease or conditions that affect blood vessels and can impair blood flow, thereby potentially raising the risks to develop Alzheimer's. Can you tell our listeners what we understand about the link between the cardiovascular health and brain health?
Fantastic question.
Thank
Fantastic.
you.
And I will begin it with a saying that is mostly non-commonplace. What is good for your heart is also good for your head, otherwise called
Yes.
your brain.
Brain, yes.
Right. So it is now increasingly very well understood that there is this close interconnection and interplay between our vascular health and our brain health.
Hmm.
So the brain is an interesting organ. It weighs at most about 5% of our body and weight, but it consumes about 20% of the energy demands of the body. And
Mm-hmm.
where that energy comes from is from the oxygen and other nutrients that are transported by the vascular system. So
Okay.
obviously, when the vascular system is impacted, the brain by default also suffers as a result.
Mm.
We discussed earlier how sleep helps helps clear toxins
Right.
from the brain. Part of that clearing process too is occurs with the inflow and outflow of blood to the brain and out of the brain.
Okay.
And that is again why now we are now better able to do some tests in the blood to find evidence or absence for some types of diseases of the brain. So vascular health is extremely important for brain health. And as you may recall, earlier on the podcast, we described how, although all types of physical activity is good, the ones that have shown the most evidence for influencing in a positive way our brain health are aerobic exercises. So those that kind of get the heart pumping, because then that also quote unquote feeds the brain. The brain gets access to the nutrients, the oxygen, and other demands that the brain has. So that is how those two things are connected, the heart and the brain.
Excellent. So what type of changes can we make in our own day-to-day activities to benefit our brain health?
There are a number of them. Obviously, the one that we've talked a lot about during this podcast is staying physically active. And that can be a range of things. So it's not only going out to run a marathon. It could be as simple as, when you are taking a phone call, instead of sitting down, to take the call, you walk slowly back and forth, back and forth, or around your living room or your bedroom or your garden or your yard as you're taking that call. That is a way to build physical activity into your day. Instead of taking the elevators to the fourth floor or third floor or second floor even, you take the stairs. When you go to a store, instead of finding that parking lot that is just right at the door, you find one that is, 2 or 3 or 4 slots down, and you walk. So there are little ways that we can build physical activity into our day, and this have incredible benefits to our brain health. We also discussed sleep. Sleep is an important way for caring for not just our bodies. All of us are aware of how our bodies feel when we get a good night's sleep and when we don't. The same is also true for our brain. While we may not feel it directly, our brain, also thanks us, for having a good night's sleep, when we do. So there's exercise, that is sleep, that is engaging in cognitively stimulating activities, which we discussed also, reading, volunteering, board games, puzzles, checkers, Sudoku, all of that. These are all things that help us engage the brain and therefore benefits our brain health. We talked about diet. That is also incredibly important, because again, what we eat, is absorbed into the bloodstream, and we mentioned how our blood circulates to the brain to bring oxygen and other important nutrients to our brains. So these are just a host of different ways that we can engage in every day to ensure better brain health for ourselves.
Wonderful. One final question to you, Ozioma. Do you act on what you preach? So tell us what your self-care is. What do you do?
Yes. Gosh, I was afraid that you would ask this question. So I am going to start with the one I do well.
All right.
And that is, I am very much physically active. I go to the gym. I work out six days a week. And actually, it used to be 7 days a week until my trainer said, "Oh, no. You have to have at least 1 day off." Yes. So that was how I dialed it back to six days a week. So I am very much physically active. I love it. I love just and taking good care of my body and my brain too in that way. Now that said, the one I do not do very well and which I already gave a hint of earlier on is sleep. I it is a battle I fight every day. I say, I'm gonna go to bed at a decent time and sleep for a long time. And I seem to always have more work than I can fit into a 24-hour day. So I have to shave off an hour here, shave an hour there. And sleep is what gets shaved those hours from the most. So it is definitely not an area I'm proud of, but it's something I am working on, and I hope to finally at some point gain some good balance where I have a regular sleep-wake cycle, and because I know that is vitally important for my brain health. Absolutely. So yes.
So I like the fact that you identify where you're coming short, and now I'm just gonna say, just pay me some money so I can, coach you on time management so you can, sleep on time.
I think I should do that. I should really do that.
Well, thank you so very much for your time today, Ozioma, and for discussing your knowledge on brain health. It's truly a delight and a privilege to have you on. And as you know, I'm always proud of you. So thank you for your work.
My pleasure, sis. My pleasure. It's so wonderful to see all the great things that you are doing, including the launch of this Super Aging podcast. It's amazing, and as you know, your biggest fan, and I'm so incredibly proud of you too. Congratulations on all your accomplishments. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you for tuning in to Super Aging Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out by leaving us a comment or email us at superagingpodcast@gmail.com or connect with us in social media sites. If you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe to our podcast and any of your favorite listening sites. Until next time, take good care.